welcome back. We're going right into segment 3. For those of you who have already watched segment 1 and 2 with us, then you know that we are embarking upon a very interesting conversation with black law enforcement professionals. We're talking about the pain of the black police, pain of the black law enforcement officers, and there is a perspective here that has not been heard so much in social media and other places too. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. We are blessed to have these 4 black law enforcement professionals who are here just pouring out some truths to us. And I'm sure to some of you, it may be some hard truths. And right now we're going to return to the portion of what is the citizen's responsibility to the police officers. And we're going to start up with Mr. John Burgess. Mr. Burgess, we got answers from these 3 gentlemen, and we want to know where do you stand with that? Now, you said this in the break, the narrative has already been written about the police, but there is a responsibility to the citizens. Whenever there's an interaction, there is a two-way responsibility. Where do you sit with that?
The word accountability on both parts. And I think the mistake we make in uniform is that we dehumanize ourselves. So accountability as a man, as a black man, in or outside of uniform is the same. So we talked about that foundation being laid, from yay high. And I'll stick with that. I'm not going to beat this up because I'm firm on the foundation being laid. So accountability as a black man, as a black child, you're respectful to any and everyone. Now, where I grew up in down south, we had black police officers patrol the community. Mm-hmm. So you sort of had that community policing because they went to school with your parents. So it was much different being from down south and coming up here. But that foundation was laid because I was more afraid of my pastor, who was my dad's best friend, than the police. So that foundation has to be laid. The accountability on both parts. And I tell young deputies that as well. The accountability lies with us in that uniform. If you see a young man or woman out on the street, speak first. Just speak without any type of interaction. That opens up the door. But the foundation to discipline, not just to an officer, to an adult, anybody. Because when you carry that mentality, you shouldn't have to worry what I'm wearing. A man in a cloth, uniform, whatever the case may be. It's straight across the board.
I appreciate that. I'm going to do a dual thing here. We'll talk about a couple of things. Right now, when we have heard the defund the police, and I want you to know I've always disagreed with that terminology. It just doesn't sound right to me. But I am a proponent of reimagining policing. It is obvious to me that policing in its current form is not as effective as it could be if we go another route. The thing that I have empathy for you gentlemen is this: there's so much bad information put out about law enforcement, and this is one of the first things the bishop ever said to me. I don't know if he remembers when I met him. I had said something about policing, and he said most people don't know enough about law enforcement to even have something to say. And I came back with, well, I may not be an expert on law enforcement, but I'm an expert on my experience with law enforcement, right? So our experience most of the time is very limited. Our knowledge is very limited. What could you say to the audience to let them know some very positive things about policing? Many times we only see the patrolman, my wife called it the blueberries in the back. We only see that aspect. But there are so many different things to do in law enforcement, and law enforcement is doing some positive things behind the scenes. We have seen law enforcement at the community events doing great things, speaking just like we've seen all that. What do we think about the reimagining of policing? If you could do it, what would it look like? And I'm going to start with Mr. Taylor. And as far as behind the scenes things about policing that maybe we don't know because we only see a very limited amount of what you do, what could you speak to that?
Accountability. Holding police officers accountable will at some point, maybe not immediately, but at some point will change the tenor of policing. And I also mentioned the article that I wrote entitled Protection versus Punishment. And if that could be adopted in the training of law enforcement throughout the state and the country. Again, you might not see the response to that immediately, but at some point you will. And I would think that if we could have our youth and young people in general, have them exposed to some of the training that police officers go through, not necessarily go through the training itself, but if you could, if they could actually see and maybe experience some of the training that law enforcement officers have to go through.
Wow. What were some of the interesting assignments that you had other than being a patrolman? Something that could open the eyes of our audience to see that the police officer does more than just pull you over and give you a ticket or kick your door in for a warrant.
Well, a lot of years in that 42-year experience, I did covert operations, state-wise and federal-wise. I'll give you an example that incorporates what you're asking and the protection versus punishment concept. I remember our team executing a search warrant, narcotics related, and it was a single family house. The majority of that arrest team went to the front door, and I took it upon myself to go around to the back door. But halfway around there, I looked through one of the side windows. My team, the majority of it, is at the front door. They're knocking and announcing themselves. And I looked through that side window and I saw a man with a gun, firing the gun away from the door, but into a concrete fireplace. Now, that protection versus punishment thing is running through my mind. And at that moment, the gun wasn't pointed at the window, nor at the front door that my team was coming through. Not pointed at the window that I was looking through, nor the front door. I saw in that split second that neither one of us, myself nor my team, neither one of us needed protection. I did not shoot to defend either one of us. When the front door was forced open, fortunately, he dropped the gun. Protection versus punishment. I didn't have to punish him because he did something stupid.
Right. That's a mouthful. You just helped us with that. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Were you finished?
I am.
All right. We're going to go to Mr. King. When you think about reimagining policing and also giving the audience some information about policing that maybe they don't know, maybe they only know the deputy who they think is mean to them when they have to go through the process, and maybe they only know about the patrol officer who's behind them with blue lights, or that team that has to kick that door in and serve a warrant. So reimagining policing and some policing that maybe the public does not know.
I was fortunate enough to work in juvenile domestic relations court as a bailiff, and I was able to see, families come in with their children. Some children needed more help than others, and I was able to mentor some of the children. I had a comrade of mine, he's passed now, he started a chess program, which I would like to see implemented probably everywhere. So basically, you would get, let's say, a team. It could be a judge, a lawyer, a law enforcement officer, a deputy, maybe somebody from community service board. And we come in and we teach the children at the juvenile detention center how to play chess, teach them the rules of the road. If they successfully complete the program while they're in. They can get, reduced sentences, they learn, and they can see us in a different light. You know, to know that we're we're human, we're folks. And I think it was a great program that we did in that county, but the guy since passed. And I would like to, when I get elected one day, to do more programs like that to help folks, and not just when they're in juvenile detention holding, but before that.
Right.
Have more interactions. Most kids, they don't have anything to do after school, right? Where I grew up, we had rec centers, we had all the stuff. If you're in my county, it's pay to play. Like, you got to pay to get to these gyms and stuff. We need more recreation centers, more mentorship programs. You mentioned something about how you may agree or disagree with defund the police, and I think that people took that and ran with it. And law enforcement officers are charged with doing more than just their duty. We get trained in the academy, basically, the standard way, and then we're asked to do as other duties are listed. So we do other stuff, and we're learning more. We're always evolving, but we do a lot of things that we shouldn't be doing. And one of the things about they were talking about defunding the police. They were talking about take some of these budgets and allocate some of that money to programs that can help deter folks. Instead of spending all this money on extra gear and all this stuff, we need more money spent, and I'm talking to the county board of supervisors, that they need to spend some more money on community programs and helping folks that way. A lot of people are in jail just for drugs. When I was growing up, we had the DARE, we had all the stuff. What do we have today? What's out there today to help our kids and then get involved? The war on drugs was terrible, especially for our community. And what are we doing since then? So I think that, unfortunately, we had the internet, which, all of us, we didn't have that.
That's right.
So, and our kids are inundated with the stuff. So I think that we have to show them more of the humanistic side. It's unfortunate that there's officers that make us look bad when we're just doing our job. And I think we need to be more in the presence of them in a non-threatening way, to be there to do programs like that and such. And one more thing I want to say about programs. I believe that there are three things that folks need, especially if they get incarcerated and come out. And the three things that most people need, basic needs. They need food to eat, they need a job, and they need somewhere to live. And these things need to be addressed. And if they're not being addressed, and jail programs do not address these things to help people, people are going to come back into the same revolving door.
That's right.
Okay? A lot of these kids, especially young kids, I see veterans in jail, and it really breaks my heart to see these kids grow up in JDR court, go over to the big house, and they fall through the cracks because they leave the secure environment, go back, and these programs don't set them up for success because they don't have the funding.
Right.
They don't have the stuff. They get rid of the drug courts. They get rid of the stuff. And these programs don't end with success stories. People say, the last thing I'll say is, oh, if I could just say one of them. No, that's a low bar.
Right.
That's a low bar.
Right.
Okay, you look at a high school, and when you move to a place, you look for graduation rates of success. And until we start moving the bar up from there and really investing into our children and these folks in these programs, it's going to stay the same because you're repeating the process.
I agree with you that returning inmates to society, having a place to lay your head, making sure you can eat, and having a job will probably cut down on the recidivism rate. A lot of them are committing crimes because you got to eat. Hunger man gonna do what they have to do to eat, right or wrong. Mr. Peters, I'm gonna ask you, when you think about reimagining policing, when you think about the image that has been painted to us civilians, there's a lot we don't know about law enforcement. There's a lot we don't know about what you do. We only know what we see and what we have experienced. How can you speak to that?
So reimagining to me is putting the cart before the horse. I think it's a responsibility of everybody in the community to get to know their law enforcement organization. I love my job, and through these communications and conversations we have, it sounds like it's a very negative thing and we're miserable, but I absolutely love my job. And I love my job not for the you know, the arrest powers or the stopping people, but a lot of the things we've talked about, you know, we do. You know, I've got an absolutely amazing community policing program, and I've got people there who are out in neighborhoods and they're doing things. You know, they're feeding people, they're getting to know them, they're not in uniform, they're out there smiling. I get pictures from this person, you know, daily, and it just makes my heart smile. We have a DARE program, and I have young folks out there talking to kids. I've watched these folks buying hotel rooms, buying food, giving their community. You know, I coach a elementary science club every year, and we go compete, and the kids see me. They see me as an officer, they see me as a silly kid, and they see me as somebody who can't swim. They see all these things. So I think when you say reimagine, it's unfair because you haven't seen what your law enforcement agency has to offer. So I ask people, when you have these issues, or when you are out protesting, or you're out saying law enforcement this, if you have not been to your agency, knocked on that door and said, who are you? You're irresponsible. We're in the community, but we can only do so much. You know, there's only so many hours in the day and only so many people, and you know, but we're out there, we're trying to connect. But we need the community to come to us and say, hey, I saw this on the news, or this happened, or this officer, you know, just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. What can we do? And we talk about it. Once we find out that our agency is okay and that was an anomaly, then we build that relationship. Hey, we apologize. Sorry you felt that way. We made you feel that way. We'll do better. Or it was a misunderstanding. But if we haven't had the community come in to our doors and introduce themselves like we're doing going out to them, then there will never be a reimagination. It will never be anything other than this contentious thing that we have right now. But we've opened our doors. Please, you know, when you see that young officer out there, and you know, the first thing is don't tell your kid behave or he's going to take you away. You know, that's always the first negative.
Right.
But say hi to him. You know, make them uncomfortable. Say hi to him. Tell them you want a hug. It's okay. They're out there to serve the community. You know, when they're getting something to eat, when they're just out in their car, they're sitting there. Start a dialogue. We have had so many great conversations with people saying, hey, I saw this on the news, what's the story? And we'll talk to you about it. But the biggest thing is, whatever agency you're talking to, we are not responsible for every other agency on earth. We can't talk for them, we don't account for them, that's them. Know who your agency is and the people in your agency. And build that relationship. Once you've done that, and if you see problems or there's things that we can improve on, then we'll reimagine policing. But until we know each other, until, you know, our extended hand is reciprocated with your extended hand, and we shake and we talk, then we can't reimagine anything because we don't understand what's going on. So I encourage everyone to come out, you know, knock on the door, make a phone call, track down somebody. If you see them in the car, stop and talk to them. Because then you'll know the person that's sitting in that car, you'll know the agency, you'll know a lot about the culture, and it will do a lot of good for you, good, bad, or indifferent. You'll understand that agency. So I don't like the, you know, reimagine or defund, because the majority of the people in the community do not know who we are. So when you know who I am and I need to change, I'll be more than happy to work on it with you. But if you don't know me, how am I going to change? And why would I change? Because we're strangers, and that's not a good way for policing.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that input. Mr. Burgess, when you think about reimagining policing, and maybe the only image that many of us have seen is the blue lights behind us, or we've seen one of our family members being taken out of court, you know, being processed, and you got the series cops, and you got the series jail, and these are images that may tell a piece of the story, but they don't tell the whole story. How can you speak to that?
First, I want to piggyback what Captain Peters said about his community engagement team. He has a wonderful community engagement team because my wife's a part of it. So I totally agree with him about that.
I tried to go past
insight. That's my plug. So this is another difficult question, but I think these guys had said it best. Now, in my opinion, I think a little different from Captain Peters, because We have on the side of our vehicles nationwide protect and serve. This is just my opinion. So with that comes a level of responsibility. I think we have to, especially with this narrative going on, we have to extend our hand. We have to be out there. I was just at a community event out in the community here, and we talked about community policing. And one of the sisters said to us, and it kind of made me think when she heard community policing, she said, well, if you consider today's community policing of 20 years ago, then you got it wrong, brother, because the only time we see you guys in the hood is when something happens. So I think we have to, just in my opinion, I think we have to take that initiative to be out there doing community events, educating people, and recruiting people. That's my plug. You have to recruit people who look like you. We can all point the finger. Come be a part of this team. We don't have the answers, man. Come be a part of this team. Now, I don't want to keep it just, I know this is a platform for law enforcement, just with teachers itself. Because a lot of it's up here. Mm-hmm. If we don't have teachers in the schools that can identify, we have the same problems, just like in law enforcement. We have to have brothers and sisters that can identify to deal with somebody when they catch somewhat of an attitude or get defensive or may just seem angry, because we're going to deal with it differently, because it's a culture thing. Right. And culture is just such a big word itself. But I think we have to take that initiative and educate before George Floyd things and incidents like that happen. If you're waiting on that, you're already just in a losing battle.
Reactive instead of proactive.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the things that I think about when I think about reimagining policing. Can we get to a point where we're looking down the road? Of course, we're always going to need police to be police. And like I said, when I call 911, I really need you.
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off. I want to say this point also. In working the corrections field, police may deal with an individual 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We're dealing 12 and a half hours a day. All right. And the one thing that I'm seeing, I have seen the last 10 years, with the rate of mental illness in young African-American males and females is tragic. So education on that aspect in itself, because if they're acting in a certain way inside the jails, imagine what they're doing on the streets. Yeah. But we have to give the community the knowledge and the education, the resources, the tools to be able to approach, different programs out there that can help them. So I think we have to take that step first and educate our community.
Wow. We've dealt with so many different things in this limited time that we have together. Before we wrap up, what I want to do is do a roundtable. We'll start with Mr. Taylor. I want to give each panelist an opportunity to have closing remarks. There may have been something that we did not get to, or maybe something that you said that you may want to clean up or something like that, but whatever it is that is on your heart to pour out to the audience, because we want them to understand what the black law enforcement officers are going through. And we want them to, for many of them, this is the first time they've ever had an interaction like this at all. This is going to be mind-blowing to some people. So if you don't mind, Mr. Taylor, if you start us off with your parting remarks, is anything that maybe we got wrong and you want to get it right, or is this something that you want to tell the audience?
Not necessarily that I've gotten it wrong, but this is in addition to what I've been mentioning all along. The article, protection versus punishment. I am extremely passionate about that. And I would like to see that incorporated in every training session throughout the country. One of the things that I didn't mention, though, about that training, when we watch some of our TV shows and programs, one of the things that I cringe at every time I see it is a scene where criminals are shooting at the police and they pass through the scene, and then once they're long gone for the next 200 or 300 yards, the police continue to fire at them. Protection is no longer needed. The protection time has passed, and now it's punishment because you shot at me. So then I wonder, wow, is this art imitating life, or is this life imitating art? Are the police now getting that training from TV, or is it the training, or is it the, pardon my phone, it's prayer time at my church, and we try to reach that session every 6 o'clock a.m. and 6 o'clock p.m.
Well, amen to that.
Yes, sir. But what's happening first? Is it law enforcement being trained, or is the entertainment industry focusing on what they've seen?
Wow.
Good question.
Thank you for that. Much appreciated. Mr. King, your closing remarks, anything maybe we didn't get to, something that you wanted to express to the audience?
Yes, I've chosen to take a different route than these other gentlemen on stage, and that comes with a big responsibility. I've chosen to represent my community in a larger way, and what I mean by that is politically. If there is no policy change, there's no change at all. That's what I believe. Laws have to be written. You need to know who to complain to. Is it your accountable supervisors? Is it your state delegate? Is your governor? When you address your stuff to me as an officer, I say, hey, you need to go talk to the sheriff. I'm just doing my job. Mm-hmm. All right? If you don't like the policy, then there's a way to complain about it. There's something to say about it. But I would encourage every person to know their elected officials, to learn how to run for office, even if you don't want, so you know what these elected officials are. Your elected officials choose your police chief. They select these folks. You go out to your accountable supervisor. Elections have consequences, okay? And a lot of people don't know. And I've chosen to put my career on the line to do this. I have heard things. I've been talked about. I've been called everything but a child of God. And I continue to fight, myself and my wife, for all of you guys to change the laws, to make these policies. Some things you guys are afraid to say that won't say because of your job. And I understand it because I feel it. I've heard it. And when you choose to go down the road that I'm going, it's the road less traveled. Now, we all have a job to do, and I appreciate all you guys being here. And I just ask y'all to pray for my family and the things we're going to represent all of you guys. Because the changes that I'm trying to make should be universal. When you leave from one county to the next, you should feel safe. If you have a child with special needs, as I do, the policies shouldn't change from place to place. We need some more uniformity in the way that we do policing today, because united, we can make the change. But as long as all our departments are different and we have all this stuff, we're always going to be separate, and it shouldn't be that way. We need national reform on every level, and now is the time. If not now, then when? It is obvious that there are policy changes that need to be made, and we need people unafraid. Okay, I'm fearful even speaking this way, and I don't have a platform until I stand in front of folks, and I'm in the newspaper, and I'm doing this stuff, and I'm fighting for all those officers who are afraid to speak. I'm speaking for some of you who are afraid to speak up because you don't have that platform. Thank you, Pastor Lacey and everyone for having me.
Thank you so much, Mr. King. We appreciate you. Mr. Lee Peters.
So I want to go back to the original point of our being here today, which was, the pain of the black police officer. And one of the things I want the community to know and understand is there are a lot of young minority officers that are out there serving nobly with distinction, and they're doing the right things, and they're in a lot of pain right now. We sit and we talk. They come in and people like John and myself in positions where they come in and we're trying to help them through this time, because it is a very trying time being a black man, a black woman, and watching the news and feeling the same way that the society feels, but then being on this side of the fence and trying to understand both, trying to keep their career together because it's what they love to do. No other reason except for it's what they love to do, and trying to keep their mind together because they're seeing people who look just like them with their lives being taken, being abused, and all those things that we're all feeling pain for. So these young folks are doing a very noble thing, and they are the minority in the minorities. And they're doing what they think is right to try and be one for their community, for their families, and for themselves. And they're trying to keep their conscience clear, and they're trying to be part of change, and they're coming to people like us and they're saying, hey, this is what I heard, this is what somebody called me, this is what they said, and we're trying to be there because there aren't many people to be there for them. It's a landmine of emotions, and it's a landmine of feelings that go along with being that young or old black police officer in today's time, because it feels like the entire world is against them. And it's not a fair or just place to be, because many of these young black police officers have done nothing to deserve the way they're treated. Even in better times, there have been, I remember, going into the black community sometimes being called, Uncle Tom, traitor, this, that, and the other. And you learn to accept that, it goes kind of into your vest, and you go home and you just kind of shake it off. Those things now are amplified because they have this feeling of, I should be protecting my people, but my people don't care about me. So beyond anything that, aspirations, positions, anything of that nature, those young folks are out there doing something that they feel is noble. And by all rights, it is. They're being clouded by judgment. They're being clouded by, this media. They're being clouded by, whatever people feel. And they're wearing all of that, but they're still going out every day protecting kids, protecting the elderly, enforcing traffic, being in the community, and doing all these things. But it is an extremely painful place for them to be right now. So we ask the community to help us help them. And no matter how we do that, we want to make sure that these folks are just given the basic respect of being humans. And it goes the same way that the community's feeling. They're feeling like, we want to be treated like human beings. We're tired of being abused. We're tired of, we want to be friends with the police. We want to have a relationship. Well, we want that for our young black officers and for ourselves. But we've been doing this long enough to know that sometimes it's not possible for us, but we want to make sure that it's possible for those young folks coming up. Because John mentioned recruiting. We want more young folks, more young people of color. When we came in, there was nobody to look up to. There was nobody who looked like us in positions that we were trying to get to. Whether we wanted that position or not, there was nobody for us to look in the eye and say, I can make it because there's a person right there who looks just like me. So we're trying to open that door. We want people to come in law enforcement. We want people to be part of the change. We want people to be passionate about helping the community, giving back to their community. So we want to help protect those young black officers because that's what this forum was for. It's not all bad news. This is a great profession. It's a great career. We've all been, in this career long enough to know that you're going to have the highs and the lows. Right now it's one of the lows, but the highs are coming. We're going to change. We're going to, regain public trust. It's going to be a while, but we're going to work towards that. We're going to make sure our communities and us are on one accord, and we're going to do our best to try and weed out those bad officers that you see on the news. We're going to hope it's not our department, but if it is, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that they no longer represent law enforcement or us, regardless of whether we keep our jobs or not. We have an obligation to make sure that the community is safe. And if it means, we leave it because it's not right, well, it's what we have to do. That's not the road we want, because being a part of the solution is a little bit better than being on the outside wishing we could make change. But I just want people to focus on what those young folks are going through, what it means to be a law enforcement officer, and what it means to be a law enforcement officer of color in this time. So we thank you. We thank Bishop Lacey. We thank all the panelists for having us and having this conversation. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Peace. I appreciate it. Mr. Burgess, your parting remarks.
Man, the title, we have many titles these days. The pain of a black police officer, the pain of a black man. The pain is real, all right? The pain is real. And we've all had the same sentiments. Community, man. Whether I have this uniform on or off, this community, we are a community. We have to reflect that. We have to lead that, as the gentleman here said. Now, I jokingly said earlier something about my mortgage, but you know, I took a level of responsibility to protect and serve the community I work in. I took a level of responsibility putting that uniform on as a black man to lead, hopefully, and inspire the black youth who come after me to want to do the same thing. So the black pain is real. Foregoing the title of an officer, a preacher, a pastor, a community leader, the pain is real as minorities. And I thank Bishop Lacey for opening the doors and inviting me here to kind of express our concerns and speak with the community. And hopefully, if we don't want to say educate, just kind of shed some light on some of the things that we do go through while we're in that uniform. And I thank you.
Well, I appreciate the panelists. I want you to know that I am the Criminal Justice Initiative Lead for one of the local grassroots organizations called Enough. And in that organization, full of black and white professionals, we're activists to a point when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement. Every person that I have talked to in that group loves and respects law enforcement. I have not talked to anyone who does not have an understanding as best we can from the outside the tremendous sacrifice and risk that you take when you put that uniform on. And I want you to know that you are respected. And as a pastor in the community, we are praying for you because we want you to be safe. We want you to be part of the solution, and we want you to be successful. We're just very passionate about rooting out bad law enforcement officers, black, white, whatever. Bad law enforcement officers cost lives, and they cost people many years of their life. And that's what the fight is. And I think part of what we did here was bring some understanding and some balance. And so I thank you, because I imagine in your position it's not the easiest thing to come and talk about this, but you greatly helped the community. So community, we think this panel, these are very honorable men who have come and just poured out to us. I want to tell you that I'm sure some of you are going to have some opinions that are positive, some negative. There are no wrong answers. But when we put this out, we want you to make comments in the threads, because we want to be proactive and not reactive. So whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking, we want to know about it. And maybe at some point we can do something similar, because the gap has to be bridged between law enforcement and the civilian society. And we do need to know what our black brothers and sisters in uniform are going through. And I think that we did a pretty good job of having an understanding of that today. So whatever you think, we want you to let us know. Once again, we do thank our very distinguished panel. We thank God for Bishop Lacey, who is hosting us. He is the quarterback of this entire thing. And we absolutely thank Mr. Mr. Lee Mooring and All About One Ministries for being the technical whiz behind the audio and video recording of this. Mr. Lee Mooring is doing a job that you just can't imagine. I don't think we could pay him enough. So he is a tremendous part of what we're doing here. And we just thank God for everybody. Brothers, I want you to give yourself a round of applause. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.